everybody. Welcome to Holy Foley. I'm Dr. Vanessa Theme Ament, and my guest today is someone I'm really excited to talk to, Bobbi Banks, who is a supervising sound editor, ADR editor, and actually an all-around professional sound person in Los Angeles. She's originally, though, from New York, and I'm excited to talk to her about that. She's also involved with our major film organizations, sound organizations in Los Angeles. And I want to talk to her about that because I think that's really kind of cool. Bobbi's worked on many films, but some of them are Crybaby, Dead Again, A League of Their Own, Straight Outta Compton, and Hustle and Flow, which I actually loved that movie. Welcome, Bobbi. It's so good to see you.
Thank you for having me. Great to see you as well.
Oh, this is exciting for me. I want to start out talking about your beginnings in New York. I know that you were working at Sound One, and I want to hear all about that because Sound One is a special place for anyone in New York. It's closed now, but it was the big thing in New York.
Yeah.
And as I have very many people know who's read my book, I did an interview with Alicia Birnbaum and talked to him a great deal about his experiences with Sound One and him coming from Israel and setting up kind of a sound aesthetic in New York, and talking to Tom Fleshman and the one mixer, one re-recording mixer tradition with Dick Forasek in New York. But I'd like to hear about your experiences with Sound One and how you got started.
Okay, so I got started actually as a fluke. I didn't know anything about film. I didn't go to school, just going to the movies. That was my history for film. And so I actually got hired as an administrative assistant to Alicia and Jeremy Koch. So I did that for a while, and then because they had a Foley stage, they had mixed stages, they had dubbers, they also had editorial spaces on several floors, and at the time they also were involved with sound mixers, which was a music recording studio. So I was administrative assistant and assistant bookkeeper. And so then what I would do, like on my lunch hour, I would go visit the various areas, whether it was on the stage or visiting Frank Cadden in the sound effects room. And then I ran into Roberta, who was actually in the sound effects library. And so when I walked in, she had these headphones on, she had a splicer in front of her, and had no clue what she was doing. So she said, "Oh, just sit. Why don't you sit down?" I got another headset, and she says, "Yeah." So she started playing. It was quarter-inch tape at the time, and so she was saying, "Well, do you hear? What do you hear?" They were effects. So I would describe the effect, and she said, "Well, did you hear this?" And it was, like some kind of odd sound other than the effect. And I said, "Yeah." I go, "Well, what is that?" So she said, "Well, let me just show you something." So she spliced something, played the effect again, and then that noise was gone. So what was happening was she was actually cleaning up the sound effects library of any, extraneous sounds. So I started going on my lunch hour to do that. And I was like, this is pretty cool. So I went and I told Jeremy and Alicia that I really would like to do that. And they go, "Well, if you want to do that, then we're going to have to cut your salary about $50," is what they said. And at the time, I was a single mom, so they figured that I wasn't going to do it. But I like challenges, so I said, "Oh, sure." So then they didn't know what to do because now I agreed to do it. So I did that for a while in the sound effects library and cleaned it up, and and then they wanted me to come back over to the administrative side. And at the time, which was like in the mid to late 80s, um, there were no sound people in the studio. So I actually wanted to mix. And they told me at the time it would take like around 7 years for me to learn how to mix. And when you're in your 20s, it just sounds like an eternity. I was like, okay, I don't guess I won't be doing this. So I went back into administration. And they really saw that I really wanted to be, in the technical part of it. So what they did was they said, okay, well, we'll give you 6 weeks to learn how to run a machine room. So that meant I had to learn a patch bay. I had to learn how to thread dubbers, had to learn how to work the projector as well, the whole back room. So Peter Riley, who was running the room at the time, he showed me everything and I wrote everything down. I had my little notepad. I'm drawing pictures of everything. And so within 6 weeks, they gave me, I was to run the first mix after 6 weeks with Mel Zelniker. And it actually went well. I was like, yes. And it was like, from somebody who really had no technical training at all, I thought that was pretty good. So I did that for a year. And as I said, I like challenges. I don't like just really sitting, waiting for something to happen or thread something. So I quit. And I decided I wanted to try sound editorial. So what I did was I just handed out my resume, made phone calls, and for about 3 months, this went on. I was like, God, what am I going to do? And then I finally got hired by Maurice Schell, who hired me on Desperately Seeking Susan as an apprentice. So that was Madonna's first film. And so then, just from there, worked with a couple of other editors there before I moved to New York, before I moved to California. So that was my big start.
So then when you got to California, how did you make that transition and start getting involved working here in California? What are some of our watchers and listeners may not know is the two cities weren't part of the same system, weren't part of the same union, weren't connected, nothing.
So what happened was while I was in New York, I learned that, you call people, you go visit them. So in New York, what happened at that time, if you went to the union, you could see a board that had like the production, had phone numbers, had who the editor was. And so it made it a little bit easier to contact somebody or go visit somebody. So I kept that same drive when I moved to California. So I found where a couple of people were, and I didn't know anybody here editorially. And so I would just make phone calls. I found out where Canon was, and I went and I just visited rooms just like I did in New York. And so after a week, I got a job at Canon with Amy Vincent hired me as an assistant. I worked at Canon for a couple of projects. And then what happened was the union, which was different here, they had a 5-year waiting list to get in the union. So while I was at Canon, the union wanted to do a mid to low budget agreement with Canon. So they had asked if we would strike. And so I said, well, if we strike, then what do we get? Right? If we strike for you. So they go, what do you want? And I go, well, I would like to be in the union. So within the first year of being here, I got in the union. And so it helped me a lot, to be able to get hired and stuff on union films here. So that was a big transition. Mm-hmm.
So as I remember now, in the mid 80s, because I did a few things for Canon,
Mm-hmm.
this film, Alan Quartermain and the Lost City of Gold,
Mm-hmm.
which we both worked on.
Yes.
I did the Foley for it at Director's Sound, and you were involved with it. And Richard King was the supervising sound editor.
Yes. And I
And,
I actually worked with Jessica Galaban, who
right,
was the ADR supervisor.
right.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, Richard King, who now has, an Oscar and is a very big deal and just did Oppenheimer and did Maestro. So that Richard King was at Canon, which was a low end
Yeah.
independent film
Yeah.
studio over on San Vicente. And
Yes.
so the story here is you never know where you will start and where you will end up. So
Yeah.
Richard King, who is a delightful
That
man
was a sweetheart.
and
Yeah.
brilliant, was at Canon. And we worked at Canon. And
Yeah.
when I was working at Canon, I'd already worked on some pretty cool things. But,
Mhm.
when you're a Foley artist, you often will go up and down, up and down. You'll work on some very big projects, and then you'll work on some low budget things while you're waiting for another big film to come.
Yeah.
And I was doing Alan Quartermain after having done some big things. And
Hmm.
I think it's just very funny the way things work out, because I just remember seeing Richard King later, because I was over in Burbank working at Director Sound doing the Foley, and
Okay.
Tracy was the the Foley editor on it. And that's just so humorous to me that you were over at the Cannon building, and
Yeah.
then come to find out we were both working on it at the same time. And Richard, who is now, a phenomenon, was our
Yeah.
supervisor. So,
No.
so the moral of the story, kiddies, is you never know in this crazy business how things will work out.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Yeah.
the other thing is, about it's all about relationships,
Yes.
you know, your relationships. And even if like you haven't talked to somebody for a long time or worked with them, it's always good to just keep that relationship going because you never know.
It's funny. There's so much talk now about transactional ways of working.
Hmm.
And I'm not a transactional person. I'm very much a relationship person. And I think that the theme that always comes back when it comes to the entertainment industry, and and boy, is it true in film. And it's true in New York, it's true in the Bay Area, it's true in LA, and I know those three cities really well and those film communities really well.
Hmm.
This is a relationship business.
Yeah.
You don't deal in this industry transactionally. You build relationships and you get to know people, and you need to be reliable and you need to be trustworthy and you need to come through, and people need to be comfortable with you, and it's all about that.
Yeah.
And as I look back at the people that I started with in the 80s, I still have phenomenally warm memories, and I
Mm.
run into them now, and there will be big hugs and big
Yeah.
smiles, because
Yeah.
it is all about that. And I think that the corporatization of so many industries have forgotten
Mm.
that that's what it is.
Yeah.
It's the relationship, and that's what keeps our industry going.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
even now, as we talk about the way streaming services turn it into something corporate,
Mm.
and look at it as a corporate business, they oftentimes, I think, don't really understand that, though the worker bees, the people that make all of this happen,
Mm.
the artists and the craftspeople, we're very relational.
Yeah.
And it's all about that for us. I mean, we want people to do their jobs well, and that's very important. Come through.
Hmm.
But it really does come down to relationships. And when I think I went to a little screening of Oppenheimer, and we were looking at the sound and we were talking about the way certain tracks were done, and Richard was there, and we were talking all the way back to Alan Quartermain, you know. So
Yeah.
it's all about relationships and working together and remembering it fondly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And back then we had like large crews, right? So because when you're on a project, sometimes you could be on 6 weeks, you could be on a couple of months, right? And so it gave us more of a sense of community a lot because there was just, it was a big crew. And now because of the budgets being a lot tighter, it's less crews
Yeah.
where maybe you had like 10 people on a crew. Now you maybe have 5
Yeah.
people, on a huge film.
Yeah.
And it's still the same amount of work, same amount of time. Sometimes it's a little less time, but it's changed quite a bit.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
then you worked at Canon, and then I guess word of mouth, people start hearing about what it's like to work with you, and you start building your body of work. And how
Mhm.
did things progress? Because you were an assistant and you did some sound editing, but for a while you were specializing in ADR,
Yeah, I worked with Beth Bergeron for
right?
many, many, many
Oh,
years.
yes.
And so me working in ADR, I think really had to do with Beth, as well, because I was as her assistant, I was able to go to the stage sometimes with her, and I would be able to see how she worked with the actor and the director, and then with the group people and how you recreate scenes, and it's just real creative. And so I learned an awful lot from Beth. Um, and so I think ADR wise, I think maybe since the mid 90s, I've been doing ADR. And so it's always with ADR, like you have, which is automatic dialogue replacement for those who may not know, where they have to come do their lines again. You have about, I would say, 5 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes most, to try to figure out the actor, like what kind of day they're having, morning, whatever. Because it's our job to help the director get them back into character. And a lot of times it's like 8 months to a year since they've been in that role. So it's having to get their headspace, helping them get to that place. And then if you haven't worked with the director before, you also have a very short window of time to figure out how to work together in order to get the product that you need. And so, you have to be a real people person, and, really have to be like, like a friend, a mom, you know what I mean? It's like you have to be a real jack of all trades sometimes with actors, because it just depends on the actor. I've had I mentioned a couple of actors where there was one who's perfectionist. I don't like to say names because it's just
Of
not fair.
course not. Yeah.
Yeah, but it was a perfectionist, and so, but every time he would do a line, he would take his headset and he would throw it down.
Mm.
It's like, I wonder what's going on. I couldn't figure it out. And so this one time I said, well, maybe it was just he and I, the director wasn't there. I said, well, whatever the direction was I gave to him, he tried it. First, he looked at me kind of quizzical, and then he tried it, and actually it worked out perfect. But because he was a little, little, when it, so after he did the line, he threw it down, and then he sat down and he listened. He goes, well, so what do you think? And so I waited a minute. I was like, no, if he goes, what? I did it perfect. So I was joking with him. I go, it's perfect. And so then after that, he was fine. The thing of it is that you have to develop a trust with them, and for them to understand that you are on their side,
Right.
and you really are not going to let something go by that is not going to be good and not put them in a good light. Right. And so he was fine after that. It was pretty funny. And
Yeah.
then there was this one guy early in the morning. He was like arguing. He didn't want to do the lines. And it was just, I was like, who does this at 8 o'clock in the morning? Right. It's just like argumentative. Turns out that he wanted to tussle back and forth, because that's the way that he got back into his character. And I didn't know it at first. At first, I was like, what is going on here? And then I figured it out. Then I figured it out, and it was fine. But there was a line where he just refused to do this line, and the studio really wanted the line. So he did the line, but he did it bad. And I said, can we just do another one, but just really do it? Because he was really good at ADR. But
Mhm.
the problem was he just didn't he wanted the original one in there.
Mhm.
So I actually promised him that I would not put that line in. And when it came down to the mix, I didn't put it in. I actually put the bad one in. So that they didn't pick it. Because I wanted, I promised, and I wanted to make sure that I kept that promise for him. So,
Right.
yeah. So it's all different kinds of things that happen.
Right.
Yeah. And then with the group, like I really like group, because the group comes in, like, say you have, like, say Straight Outta Compton, where you have the concert scene, and then they go through, and then outside there's a riot scene. And so you're able to recreate those scenes, right? And it's the way you shoot it as well as the way you edit it. And I like to shoot in layers so that you can either add or do it, right? And so the whole thing about groups, like big groups like that, is that you really want the person who's watching the film to really be engulfed in the scene.
Mhm.
And so I always think it's really fun because I try to, when I'm shooting, sometimes I close my eyes because I want to see if I can feel like I'm in the scene with it. So those are things I just love to do those things.
It sounds like what you try to do also is bring a sense of play and fun to it and get relaxed and enjoy the day.
Mhm. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, you have to. I don't know how these group people do it, you
Well,
know?
I'll tell you, I don't either. I started out as a singer and an actor, did
Mhm.
some loop group, had a group for a while because some of the dubbing mixers asked me if I would put a group together because I understood how things worked on a dub stage, and some of the group stuff would come in and it would be too busy or draw attention to itself and wouldn't lay in right. And I
Yeah,
think you know what I mean.
yes.
And so I would bring in actors, and I would always give them the better stuff to do and give myself the really pedestrian lines because
Mhm.
I was in SAG. I'd give myself the pedestrian lines and let them be the creative, brilliant geniuses that they were. And I'd
Mhm.
get like some of our great animation actors to come in.
Ah,
And I was really lucky. And I love actors because I'd been one for so long and I'd done theater um and and then I had to step in and be an ADR editor a few times. And
oh,
I found that understanding actors and having trained as an actor and worked with some great teachers, including like Nina Foch and Actors Alley and really good teachers,
mhm.
that I understood I could read the psychology of their method and their approach and their insecurities, and was really good at getting into that space and feeling comfortable with them. And it really is about understanding what their approach is or what their insecurities are or what makes them really relaxed. But I have to tell you too, being able to work with some of the really greats, like when I did the Winnie the Pooh movie and I was having to shoot some of the ADR for it, working
Mhm.
with Jim Cummings or um, working with all of the Winnie the Pooh characters, Frank Welker, and
Yeah.
just watching how they worked, I learned a lot about how the very best operate, and then I could take those lessons with me.
Mhm.
And then just knowing how Dawes Butler had trained some of the
Mm.
great voice actors because he approached it as acting rather
Yeah.
than trying to make goofy voices, because
Yes,
many of
yeah.
the greats studied with Dawes or studied with apostles of Dawes.
Mhm.
And voice acting and then bringing it to loop group, some of them also would do loop group, but voice acting is not just going in and being goofy. It's about really bringing a character to,
Absolutely.
the performance.
Mhm.
And I think people who have never been on an ADR stage and worked with somebody like Doc or somebody like Tom O'Connell, who record these people and really know how to put them at ease and make them feel really relaxed and working, don't understand what you're trying to do is, if you have to do your line again, you have to get back into the space, back into the scene, have the energy and probably the line reading you had a year ago, and
Mhm.
you're working on something else now.
Mhm.
And you have to have it lay in and fit in right. And you were on a set in the moment with another actor, and
Yeah.
you've got to get into that space again. And then you've got to time it
Yeah.
after 3 beeps and come in on the silent fourth beat.
Yeah. It's hard.
And that means you've got to be technically thinking about it. You can't move. You can't be doing the physical movement you were doing in the scene. And it's now I love doing ADR. But I started out singing in studios, so I'm
Mhm.
really mindful about how to do that. But it's not an easy skill for these actors to
Yeah, it's
do.
hard.
Some of them really don't like doing them, and some of them love doing it.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And I have such a regard for actors. I have a great deal of respect for them. whether they love drawing attention to themselves or whether they don't, I don't really care. I have so much respect. I think it's a noble craft
Mhm.
because they are trying to experience the humanity of another character in the world.
Yeah.
And anyone who doesn't act might not understand that. They're not just trying to show off.
Mhm,
They're
mhm.
actually embodying what it is like to be human in another experience, in another situation with other human beings.
Yeah.
And that's something to really admire.
Yeah. Yeah. I
And
don't know how to do it.
and um, the kind of actor I've always been is either funny, I can do dramatic acting,
Mhm.
but I've always been good at comedy and musical theater. But when I look at some of these astounding, brilliant, phenomenal actors
Mhm.
who blow my mind, like I think of Billy Crudup, or I
Mhm.
think of well, I mean, we think of all of the greats, but I think of Billy Crudup right now because I really think the morning show has just really shown everybody what a genius he is. But I saw him on Broadway in Three Sisters, and I was just thrilled.
Mhm.
But you think of some of these really tremendous actors, and you realize that they transcend something that many of us can never really understand, and you really have to respect them. And so, having the job that you have, and I've known enough ADR editors to know that there are some that really have a gift for
Mhm.
making an actor feel safe
Yeah. That's
to just play and be in the moment and not feel like they're going to be ripped apart or chastised or scrutinized with somebody who's being very persnickety to see if trying to catch them doing it wrong. Because that's the
yeah.
worst thing you can do to an actor.
Yeah, you can't do that. I mean, I've worked with some actors that just were, they weren't that great at it.
Hmm.
And they know it. You know what I mean? They know, we do. And so for me, it's like you said, you have to make them feel comfortable and
Right.
trust. And so it's like, okay, well, let's just do a few and then we'll just put it together. Right. So it's letting them know that just, we'll do it a few times and I'll take bits of here and here and here. We'll put it together. And
Yeah.
then sometimes what we'll do is we'll be able to play it back that way, like a bit from here and here and here, so that the actor can really hear what I'm hearing. And when it gets put together, it's going to be good.
Right.
So it actually helps to relax them a bit when for the people that are having, some difficulty, so.
One thing that I've always noticed about you, Bobby, because I've known you now for quite a while, quite a while. I've run into you on and off and seen you a lot, is that you kind of reek of a kindness,
Oh,
warmth, and a kindness. I've always noticed that about you. And
oh,
everybody that knows you would just call you a lovely lady, a kind lady, and lady,
mm,
not, I mean, just lady is not a word that we use all the time, but just such a lady and just a genteel person. And I think that that's something that's missing a lot in our industry right now and in our society, which tends to be rather coarse and aggressive right now.
mm,
And I think that that's really something that I think you just carry with you that I've always really admired. And so when you've had to supervise as an editor,
mhm.
how do you keep control of the situation and still maintain this quality that you have that is just so much an essence in you?
Oh, that's so kind. I think I just, from supervising ADR, it's the same, you're working with people, right? And and you're also a creative person. So, talking to the director and the picture editor, again, developing the trust there and their vision for things, right? And because it's a team effort. So it's not like, even if I have ideas, I'll say my ideas, or what I might do is say, hey, well, what do you think about this? Right? Instead of always trying to drive something that I see or would like to see happen. because again, it's a team effort, and if you don't come into something that way, I think, it's not going to be as successful as it could be. I think that there's just a way that you talk to people, um, and just communicate in different ways. I'm just not a harsh person like that, I guess, because I just feel like, again, it's a team effort, and even on the ADR stage, like and I'll say to the director, well, do you think that maybe he should sound a bit more like this, whatever it is? And I'll approach it as a question so that it comes from he can think about it, we play it, you think about it, and however he feels, then that's what we do. So I really want the vision of the director to really shine, and however that's going to be. I mean, I've worked with some difficult people, like on a mixed stage, and you have to learn to pick your battles, right?
But I want to kind of push a little bit more on this because you have two aspects of you that make it trickier.
Mm.
First off, being a woman who was a supervising Foley artist and was in a world of just men, 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 men. And always, now I can't believe how far I got. I can't believe I was a supervising Foley artist and one that was on a dub stage and one that was saying, would you please put together an ADR group? And you know what? We don't really need anybody telling you what to do. You just handle it and you book the stage and you do this and you do that. And I can't believe I was trusted. And, a lot of it was Jimmy Honore,
Uh-huh.
who was magnificent to me, starting out at Go Million. And then when he, was at Sony, just,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know, that man just opened doors for me. He just
Mm.
trusted me and saw something in me. And he had a lot to do with why I was given opportunity. And then Tommy McCarthy,
Mhm.
those two men
Yeah.
just made so much possible for me.
Yeah.
And a lot of people think that if men are helping a woman, it's because they want something back from her, but it is not true.
Right.
Those two men opened doors for me strictly because they just saw me as a straight shooter and willing to work hard and
Mhm.
never asked for anything except that I just do my job.
Yeah.
And I'm very grateful for that. But you were a woman and then a woman of color in a business that I think is rather dismissive of women in leadership roles and dismissive of people of color in
Mhm.
leadership roles.
Mhm.
And I marvel at the fact that someone who started out as an assistant, and I mean, I've watched how you've progressed
Mhm.
and how you've done it with such gentility because you are not pushy, you are not aggressive. I've never seen you have to scrap and fight.
Mhm.
Um, and somehow you've been championed and you've been allowed, and you are now, and we're segueing to the third thing you've done that I marvel at. You've put yourself in situations where you were the president of Motion Picture Sound Editors, and you have been in these leadership roles in our professional organizations. Tell me how you did it.
Well, I'll first speak to one point first, in that I don't want to let it seem like I haven't had any hard times or bad things happen, or things that have upset me, because of being a woman and because of being a person of color. I mean, I've had people alter my work before it went to the stage, and I knew that they did. Um, and it was, for me, I needed to, I felt I needed to let them know that I knew that this was happening. So I'll just give an example because I don't know all the people that will listen and watch, your program, but I do want to give some hope, for people and to say that, even though things do happen, there's ways to kind of get around it. And so I was an editor on a cutting ADR, and somebody went to look at the material before you go to the stage, which you usually do, right? If there's something wrong about. So I got a phone call. Can you come down and look at this? And I went down and they go, this doesn't really seem right. Well, I realized that it wasn't the way that I cut it. It was kind of like they tried to do something else and then couldn't get it back to the way that it was.
Mm.
And so I said, oh, you know what? I really don't remember doing that way, but I can fix it. Right. So then it let that person know that I know that wasn't, that something happened without pointing a finger. Right. And then that was all. I fixed it and we went on. Another time I was building tracks with film and I found that they got inverted the wrong way. And there were only two people in the room. And so when I came back, I said, did you notice if anybody else was in here? Because I just noticed that, certain things are switched around. Right. So it's letting them know I understand that you've done something here that wasn't correct, but not calling them out on it.
I do marvel at your patience and your way of navigating this. I do want to though hit on these organizations that you're in
Okay.
because you've been a busy beaver.
So I was president of Motion Picture Sound Editors for 8 years. Um, and the thing is, I always was like, well, geez, I'd like to do that, try to help and, do some change and, different direction and all that kind of thing. And I like putting people together. Um, and I love sound. I love what we do.
Mhm.
And so I guess anywhere where I feel that I can help in some way, help to make change, help to open doors for other people, help the next generation coming up. That's what I want to do because I feel, I've been in the industry for a really long time and it's time to give back and to really help. So I think that that's my motivation to get involved in a lot of things.
Mhm.
Um, it seems like a lot. Um, not every committee meets, all the time. Um, I am also a governor for the sound editors for the TV Academy. And so I'm excited
You
about that.
always get my vote.
Thank you. And I'm involved with the membership committee there and some other committees at the TV Academy. At AMPAS, which is the Film Academy for with the Oscars, I actually chaired a 2020 was an inclusion committee. And in those 2 years that I chaired, we had the most diverse group of membership, not only domestically, but internationally. And so we had a really good team of people with was involved with all the branches at the academy. And so it was great because I also was able to be involved with other branches in their meetings. So you can kind of see what they're thinking, how they're thinking, and it's just kind of cool. Um, Let me see. I work with the Academy Gold mentorship program. So I'm a mentor. For about 3 years, I've done it. And we have one mentee that for 8 months. And so it's just kind of cool. Like, oh, can you just look at this project and tell me what you think? And, or they'll have a website and I give them information, give them ideas about what to do, how to make it better.
Mhm.
Uh, so it's just about giving back. I'm a new board member for Women in Film. which I'm excited about that, for some of the programs that they're starting up. And so it's just, again, it's all about giving back.
I'm just thrilled that I mean, I did not know much about your origin story, but I'm just thrilled that you decided to come to the other coast and be here, because
Yeah,
I think what you've done is you've shown a lot of people what is possible, and that this really is just about building relationships and continuing to flourish within those relationships, which has been my experience.
yeah. I'm also on the industry council for Roybal Film and TV Magnet, which is a school that is in Echo Park, and it's a high school. So
Mm.
it's starting to, teach them early, about the different aspects of film. So it goes all the way from PA, director, editor, sound, production sound, post sound. It's a really good program. So, that's one of those things that's really good to be involved in, I think.
Well, I am so grateful that we had some time here to talk about some of these things, because I've been watching what you've been doing, and seeing your name on so many different emails of being involved with this and being involved with that. And I'm kind of following it thinking, okay, she's doing so many things. I just need to catch up with her and find out what y'all doing. Um,
Um,
and I want to thank you for being here with me today. And we'll catch up some more, because I think there's more to explore here. But I want to thank you very much, Bobbi, for being here.
Thank you for inviting me. I had a great
Yeah, it's so good
good
to see
talking.
you.
Yeah, you too.